right, it is June 26th, 2024. And I had a request for this video. So I want you to tell me about heaven.
Wow.
So go back to the beginning and tell me the story. What all happened and how you ended up where you were.
Well, I was taken to Cleveland, and Dr. Whitner gave me 4 books of all my records, and I carried them in up there and went through emergency and asked to see Dr. Strong. She told me to ask to see Dr. Strong. And some elderly nurse says to me, "You just can't come in here and demand to see a doctor." And I wasn't feeling well, and I raised up off the bed and I shook old Butch Foster's finger at her, said, "Listen, lady, I was told to do that, and it's none of your business. And she runs the emergency, so I'm telling her what to do." Well, then she leaves me, and this young intern steps up and he said, "Mr. Foster, if you were told Dr. Strong will be here to see you, he will be here. And, going through emergency, you lay there a long time." Well, must have been about 15 minutes. This Dr. Strong comes through with 6 of his, I want to say his
Med students or
other young
intern-
doctors,
interns?
intern. Anyhow, they were with him. And he shook my hand and gave me a good handshake, and a good handshake means a lot to this old man. But anyway, he takes him and he leaves. And it must have been about a half an hour. They all come back in carrying my books. And I said, "Mr. Foster, we have decided that you just don't have doctors, you have friends." And I says, "Well, I do consider them friends." And he says, "Not one, all of your doctors." So that was done. Well, then I went up there because I had a phlebitis in my leg. And I had been to Boardman before I went there. So anyway, I went up there and saw Dr. Strong, and they came and got me, and they took me to my room. And they said, the next morning they came in, they said, "Mr. Foster, we're going to do exploratory surgery on you." Well, I didn't know what exploratory surgery was. I thought I didn't care what they did because I was in so much pain and misery. And I was gray.
Well, you had been throwing up for several days.
I was throwing up and I was in pain. I sat on the end of the couch and held my stomach and I sat like this all night long. And I told your mother that if I'm alive by morning, take me to the doctors, and if I'm not, call the funeral home. So anyway, she laid on one couch and I sat on the other couch. So anyhow,
I remember listening to you because I was in that room off the living room, and I remember listening to you sick all night long, and you never got sick.
Well, I hadn't thrown up in years I hadn't thrown up in years. It always affected me the other way. So anyhow, this Dr. Strong said we're doing exploratory surgery. So he comes and he came back in. Well, at this time, before I went in for surgery, Karen had showed up, and Uncle Harry came with her. And Pastor Don and Pastor Pauline came. And they were talking to me, and I had this nurse, very beautiful person. And she says, "Mr. Foster, can I get in on this prayer?" And so...
Was that Angela?
Angela was her name. So she she got in on this prayer, and Pastor Dawn prayed, and everybody held hands, and I was laying in this bed. But when Angela got on it, I'm telling you about it right now, she's giving me goosebumps. When she started to pray, it felt like I was raised off that bed, and this energy was just going around me. I could just feel it. It felt like I was lifted. I had my eyes closed, and it just felt like I was lifted off the bed. So the prayer was done, and I was getting ready to go through these doors to this operating room, and Dr. Strong came out, and there stood my brother and Karen and Pastor Don and Pauline, and Dr. Strong said, "Remember me in prayer too, because I'm a believer." And I raised up off the bed and shook my finger at him. I says, "I knew there was something about you I liked." So that was the conversation. So then they did the surgery on me, exploratory surgery, which I didn't know what it was. But when I woke up the next day, I lifted my covers, and here there was a bag out my side. So you talk about a shock. My intestines was out my side. So I had this nurse come in, and she wasn't old then, but she was still there. The last time I was in Cleveland, she was still there. She says, "I remember you too, Mr. Foster." Anyway, she remembered me. Of course, I give her a rough time. But anyhow, so I came through the surgery. I'm back in my room, and my leg was swelling where the blood clot was, the phlebitis was. And they came in to get me out of bed, to take me for a scan of my leg, and they stood me up, and the blood clot flipped out, and it went to my lungs, and I fell back on the bed, and I could hear code blue. I could hear people yelling, screaming, and this little nurse came in that morning, and her name was Angie, not Angela, Angie. And she said she went dancing out on the flats. Well, I didn't know what the flats were, but I can dance, and I like to dance. And I thought, boy, if I could get out of bed, honey, I could show you how to dance. That's what I thought to myself. But she was cute, okay? So then, as they gets me out of bed, I fell backwards, and I heard him saying I died. And they were working on me, and the doctor, another doctor came in. It wasn't Dr. Strong. And he said, "We're losing him." And he was yelling at the nurses, and when you know, this little Angie leaned down, she was putting tubes in my nose and down my throat, and they were pumping on my chest, and Angie, she was working on me up in my head, and she said, "Mr. Foster, if you come back, I'll go dancing with you." That's what she whispered in my ear. But when I died, my dad had already passed away, and my mother was there. And as I died, my daughter Sarah came, and she had this flannel shirt on and her blue jeans, and she was standing at the end of the bed, and she was crying. Her eye makeup was running, and I said, I'm okay, I'm all right. I'm going to be all right. I kept reassuring her, and she was crying and crying. Well, this all happened when I died. And as I died, I could hear, everything was black, and I was walking through the valley. It was dark, and I could hear rippling water, and I was walking with Jesus. He had me by the arm, and we were walking, and he was saying, "Are you ready?" Well, I said goodbye to my mother, my kids, and as I was walking, I could smell alfalfa hay, my favorite kind of hay. I could smell lilacs, something that's every spring. I could smell all the fragrances that I liked, But as we were walking, we walked through this valley, and we walked over this water. There was like a walkway, and we started up the hill, and as we started up the hill, there was this light. It was small, but the closer we got to it, the bigger it got. And now it's hitting me on the legs, and I could feel my legs getting warm. And by the time we got up to the light, I could look through, and there was these, it was just like, I want to say, shadows or clouds of pinks, purples, lavenders. It was just like a pathway through these clouds, all different colors. And Jesus says, "Are you ready?" And he stepped in the light, and I started to step in, and I said, "Who's going to take care of Em?" And Em was my little granddaughter at that time. She was about 1.5 years old. And when I said, "Who's going to take care of Em?" I came back and I woke up. And Angie, so when she came in the next morning to sign in, I looked up with one eye and I said, "Well, are we going to Anson?" And she laughed and she said, "You heard me." I said, "Yes, I heard everything." She said, "Did you hear the doctor yelling at me and cussing, saying we're losing him, we're losing him?" I said, "Yes, I heard that too." She says, "I just couldn't believe you came through what we was working on you." She says, "You surprised all of us." And the presence of being there, getting to see what heaven was like, and getting to walk with Jesus and see all the things I saw from here to there was a magical moment. And when I've told people about this, people have said to me, especially my one sister-in-law, Aunt Cheryl, she says, "Were you scared?" I says, "What was there to be scared about? I was with Jesus." And to me, every time I've been up there, I would see
up in Cleveland, you mean?
Up in Cleveland, I would see my Dr. Strong. And he even called me to see how I was twice. How many doctors call you that? And when the last time I saw him and got to talk to him, he was there. And I was there to see somebody else, and I didn't know he was back because he travels out of the country. He came out of one door, and I came out of this door. And he goes, "What are you doing here?" I says, "What are you doing here?" And we went towards one another, and we hugged one another. And he says, "Boy, is it good to see you." He says, "I got to say this to you. How many times I sewed you up?" I had one doctor from Argentina, and he came in one time I was up there, and he says, "I was told you were coming in." He says, "You got to wait and see this Mr. Foster." And he says, "Every time we worked on you, I thought we'll never see you again, and you just kept coming back, coming back, coming back." And the way I look at it was, I had prayers, and I have this wife that just is a prayer warrior. And I was in God's hands, and I was still here to enjoy my grandkids. Even the things I'm going through now, they're just minor things in my life. But if it's ready, if he's ready for me, I'm ready. I'm going to miss everybody. They're going to miss me too, I think. But God has been good to me. Amen.
Amen. So did you, I thought at one point, I remember you telling the story where you there were picture frames or something that you were seeing scenes from your life. Did I just make that up in my head that you saw that? Or was mixing stories?
I just saw things of my life.
You could smell things, but
I could have all the fragrances. You just don't understand. The smell after a rain, the lilacs when they first come out and bloom, and in the morning there's dew on them. They smell so heavenly. I says, the new mown hay. It's just things that are far. When you plow the ground, the smell of new plowed ground, it just, you've got to be a farmer to love the smell of dirt. It's just simple things, but I walked through it all. But all the time I was walking, I was telling people goodbye that I loved and have met. And my mother, one other time I was up there, and Dr. Strong operated on me, and they gave me this medication, a different kind of pain medication, because I'm allergic to everything. And my mom came, and she had passed. My mom came, and she had her yellow nightgown on, and she put a wet washcloth on my forehead, and she laid in bed alongside of me and said, "You're going to be all right. You're going to be all right. You're going to get through this." And when I woke up, I could smell my mother. I don't know whether you can understand, but I could smell my mother. So when the nurses came in, I told them, I said, "What you gave me, but you can give me that again," because the dream I had, or the reaction I had, was so beautiful. I would like to live that over and over and over again.
Now, when you woke up, when you flatlined, because like you literally
Died.
you flatlined, and they had to jumpstart your heart and get you back.
Yes.
You said you were talking, while you were saying goodbye, you said goodbye to Grandma, and you said goodbye to Sarah. And Sarah was wearing her black and white flannel shirt, and she had...
All right, I forgot Sarah. Sarah was wearing this flannel shirt and her makeup, her hair and everything when I died. She was there with me. But when I came out of it and I woke up, she came up to see me, and she was standing at the end of the bed, and there she was standing with her shaved shirt on.
She wasn't there before you died.
She wasn't there, but she was there.
When you came back, when you were awake and later in the day, she was there wearing that shirt.
That shirt just looked like she was standing at the men's bed crying. I said, "You were here earlier." She says, "No, I wasn't." I says, "Oh, yes, you were. You were here earlier. I told you goodbye." And her Emily was my little granddaughter, and when I finally did come home after 22 days of throwing up, IVs on me, sneaking candies to eat because they wouldn't give me anything. I lost 50-some pounds. I finally got to come home, and they brought Emily in to see me, and I was sitting in a recliner, and she came in, and she looked up, and her mouth dropped open, and they reached down to pick her up, to set her up inside the chair. They thought she was taken away. She started screaming and kicking and crying. When they set her alongside of me, she looked up at me, and she went like this, and just kept patting my face with her little hand. Now that's the one memory that I remember, and she tells everybody now that I'm the reason that Pap's still alive. Because I said, "Who's going to take care of him?" But that, you can't imagine, you see things of beauty, and you hear of things, and the paths were like silver, gold. It was just all this beauty, and Jesus was with me. So there you go. Hope I did a good job.
Thank you. You did great.
Okay. Now you know the rest of the story, and that's all I'm going to say about that.